Can I jump in here for a second? When I first heard all this business about atmospheric ions, my first thought was, why should we expect there to be many ions in the atmosphere at all? I mean, to recap, an ion is just an atom or a molecule that has gained or lost an electron. If it loses an electron, it's a positive ion. If it gains an electron, it becomes a negative ion. But here's the thing. Unlike charges attract. So moving about in the atmosphere, I'd expect the positive and negative ions to find each other, and then boom, they're back to being neutral. However, as it turns out, there are some processes that are constantly generating atmospheric ions. For example, cosmic rays. These are highly energetic particles from across the universe that slam into our atmosphere and transfer their energy to the air, creating ions in the process. Cosmic rays are thought to create around 500 ions per cubic centimeter at ground level. In fact, they're the most significant source of ions generated over the oceans. But here on land, there are other sources of ionization. Things like natural radioactivity. There are these long-lived isotopes of uranium and thorium, and their decay products that can spit out highly energetic particles in the form of alpha, beta, and gamma rays. These ionize the air. They vary widely from place to place, but they can contribute hundreds up to many thousands of ions per cubic centimeter. And then you have thunderstorms. Each lightning strike generates copious amounts of ions. Perhaps one of the more surprising sources of negative ions is waterfalls. As water droplets collide with each other or with wetted surfaces with high velocity, the water molecules create this electrified spray with negative ions that can be transferred to the air around it. Depending on your distance from the waterfall, ion levels can reach tens of thousands of ions per cubic centimeter. And the same effect occurs with ocean waves crashing on shore. Now, there are some places that do naturally have lower concentrations of ions, namely the interiors of houses and businesses, because these structures provide some shielding from the cosmic rays and from the natural radioactivity. Plus, if you have metal ducting and air conditioning, well, some of those charged ions will get stuck in the ducts. So typically levels inside homes and businesses can be as low as around 100 or 200 ions per cubic centimeter. Ion concentrations are also typically lower in polluted areas, in big cities or around factories. And that's because the ions actually cling to those pollutants, or the aerosols, and so they don't live as long in the atmosphere. So the assertion that we live in environments with fewer ions than our ancestors is true. If you're thinking that you feel better around waterfalls and oceans and after thunderstorms than you do in polluted cities or around big factories, well, maybe that's the reason why scientists have been studying the effects of negative ions on human health for nearly a century. So let's consider the evidence. In one study, people suffering from seasonal affective disorder were randomly assigned to one of three treatment groups: bright light therapy, high concentrations of negative ions, or low concentrations of negative ions. They found that both bright light therapy and high-density negative ions independently produced antidepressant effects, but not low-density ions. In another study, participants in a high-density negative ion environment had significantly faster reaction times and reported being more energetic than those in an ambient air control. Now, if all this sounds too subjective, EEG experiments showed people exposed to high-density negative ions had a slower alpha wave frequency with higher amplitude. Participants also reported increased relaxation, alertness, and improved working capacity. This has even been taken into real-world work environments. An air ionizer was fitted to the air conditioning unit in an office building and periodically turned on and off over 12 weeks. When the ionizer was pumping out negative ions, workers reported 50% fewer headaches. They also reported increased alertness, perceived atmospheric freshness, and environmental and personal warmth.